What does Palm Sunday mean? That was what I had scrolled at the top of every page of my preaching journal this week. What does Palm Sunday mean? And of course, we might be tempted to wonder, what does this day, Palm Sunday, mean for us as God's people? I mean, liturgically, we know how it stands in the church year, the moment now that opens us to Holy Week, as we look ahead to those days when we remember Christ's Last Supper, and when he called us on the phone, when Christ gathered his disciples, when he was betrayed, when he was executed, put on trial, died on the cross. We know liturgically where this day stands. And of course, the liturgical movement that we observe as a church is based on a scriptural movement of similar pattern. But now there's some other pieces of the gospel that have come before today's story that may inform a little bit about what this day is about. But if we look back throughout Luke's gospel that we've been hearing from since the beginning of Advent back in December, if we look back at some of those first stories we heard, we remember hearing Mary, the mother of Jesus, sing in response to her pregnancy. Do you remember that? She sang this song of a God who makes the world right, of a God who calls the rich and mighty to account, bringing them down and uplifting the poor. She sings of a God who speaks boldly in our world to make changes that will benefit all, especially those who need it most. And then we remembered as Jesus began his ministry, those words he proclaimed in his home synagogue when he arrived there, them thinking, right, that their hometown boy was going to bring it home, and he says, no, I come to bring something different. Release the captives, healing for those who are blind, good news to people who are poor, liberation from all those things that are holding you economically or otherwise. He proclaims that through him God is ushering in a new era like the year of the Lord's favor, when debts were forgiven, servants would be set free, and everyone could begin again. And as Luke's gospel continues, those themes are played out time and time and time again. And immediately before we get to today's story of the processional, triumphal entry into Jerusalem, those last two stories before today are the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector who defrauded his whole community. And then after being confronted with that sin by Jesus, he repents, he turns around, he returns all the money he's stolen, and then some, and gives more to those who need it. First we have that story of Zacchaeus. Then Jesus tells a parable about a brutal rich ruler who gives these huge sums of money to his slaves to see if they'll make him richer or not. When that last slave returns to his master with just the coin he was first given, no investment made, the ruler calls for his head. We have this illustration again of the brutality of amassing of power and wealth that only benefits some. And the Palm Sunday story continues this theme, beckoning us to again rethink what true power and true wealth and true glory mean in our lives. But when King Jesus comes in, riding on a colt to those around him, well, kings of the day probably wouldn't be riding into cities like Jerusalem on a small, young animal like that. If Caesar would come from Rome, or another powerful leader from the region, they'd be riding their war horses with their entourage and their army behind them. They would be showing the people what the world's power looks like. Pax Romana, Roman peace, as enforced through death. But yet the crowd proclaims that Jesus is a different kind of king. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, they say. Peace in heaven, glory in the highest heaven. They're boldly proclaiming that the rule of Caesar and others in their world is not the way God rules the world, but that Jesus is coming to bring a new sort of liberation that will be good for all people, that will set all of humanity free. Which, of course, doubles down on the whole message of Passover that they're remembering in Jerusalem that week in the first place, remembering their deliverance from Egypt's slavery and oppression of old. And so it's no wonder then that by the end of the week, they have him on a crucifix. Because he resists the power structures of his day, and they weren't ready for this different kind of king. Which makes me wonder if we're ready for this different kind of king as well. Are we ready to respond to Jesus' triumphal entry into our lives? Are we ready to respond to a king who says, do differently for the benefit of all? Are we willing to change if that's what Jesus beckons us to do? I don't know. But Palm Sunday reminds us that Jesus is coming. We may not be ready for it, but Jesus again marches into our lives time after time after time, confronting our deepest sins and our worst depths, and journeying with it through us, so that we might know there is true life to be had beyond that fear. Again and again and again and again. Which is why we sing Hosanna as often as we eat of this meal. So we beckon our Lord to ride on. To ride on into all of the places we find ourselves, to ride on into our lives, to ride on into death, to reveal the true kingdom that is about to emerge. So blessed Palm Sunday to you, dear people, and a blessed Holy Week to you, for much is to come. Amen?
Amen.